What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? How y'all doing tonight? Yo, it is 9:37. I had y'all on for a little while longer than I intended to. Look at my collar all whopper jog. If y'all are talking to me, I can't see you yet, so let's remedy that. All right. I see Terry Meredith. I see April Wright. I see Kitty Foxy. I see Iowan Tribal Stone Flowers. I see Kelly James joining the pre-read for the first time ever. And I'm here. Here is Julian. I hope y'all can hear me okay. I'm gonna sneeze. It just seemed like a thing to do. Wanted to try it out. It was fine. A little overrated. Sort of a mild head explosion. The word was wappa jog. I think in some other similar cultures they say cattywampus. It basically means that the shit was all flicted. Be a million MCs that claim they want some. But see, I create styles to make your ears go numb. Piece that stands out. Yeah, you know how we go. My best friend Steven at the Home Depot. Warrington is in the house. I can't forget Southside. Walk past MCs like that girl did to Farside. I'm labeled as the cat's meow, the MC with the no. Act like you know. Not now, but right now. Beast of the East. On MCs, I have a feast. I eat that ash like quiche. Crack a smile like Shanice. Should I Jamaica scene? Jamaica Queens, or you could find me out in Georgia or anywhere in between, because if my partners don't look good, Malik don't look good. If Malik don't look good, the Quest don't look good. And if the Quest don't look good, then Queens don't look good. But since the styles are universal, New York won't look good. Picture Fife losing a battle. Come on, get off it. Put down the microphone, son. Surrender, forfeit. Did I hear something about a crew? What they want to do, you better call Mr. Babyface so he can bring out the cool in you. Or it'll be a sad love song being sung by Tony Braxton, and I'll dissect you like a fraction. I don't know why that was stuck in my head, but it was. So I wanted to go ahead and get it out. So thank y'all for indulging me in that. Donathan is scratching to come into the room. Now, here's the joke. Before I started preparing for the episode, he was in my mom's room, and I said, Donnie, come on, let's go. Let's get ready. And he just stood there looking at me, and I said, come on, because I know you're going to want to come out later. Because, you know, I've told y'all before, when the lights change, you know, he kind of has a sense of when it's time for the show. And he didn't come out. And so I was like, look, I don't want to hear you scratching at the door and making a whole lot of noise once I get the show started. And of course, because he has no respect for me whatsoever. It's been a long time since I rocked the collar and the tie. It used to be a daily thing. Tuesdays would be a bow tie. I would do this even on Saturdays when I had no place to go. I just felt like it tonight. I don't know why. I'm not thrilled about how it looks. I kind of feel like I look like my head is detached. Like, I swear to God, I have a neck. Check it out. There it is. I got a whole, like an appendage here that attaches my head to my body. It's not just a balloon sitting on top of a framework. Anyways, Chekhov's bop gun. So for me, one of the best written characters in comedic television is Michael Gary Scott of The Office. One of the most brilliantly written characters. His evolution over the, I believe, 7 seasons that he served as manager of Dunder Mifflin is really one of the most fascinating to watch. He starts off as a complete bully, aggressive, ugly, hostile. And while elements of that continue throughout his character arc, he begins to develop a much more vulnerable facade. And we see insecurities, and we see dashed hopes and dreams, and what informs his behavior makes him a somewhat more empathetic. You can kind of weirdly relate to this guy who wants to have it together. What's happening, L-Jack? Good to see you, but just doesn't. One of my favorite things about Michael Gary Scott is that he does improv comedy. And in his improv group, what he often ends up doing is what he always does. It's kind of his go-to is he brings a gun to the scene. And his improv teacher says to him, you can't, you have to have escalating energy. The whole point of improv is to escalate and to add. And Michael's response to that is, well, what could be more exciting than a gun? You bring a gun in and everything is just that much more exciting. And it doesn't play well in improv, obviously, because he always comes in, boo, everybody put everything down. And I'm Michael Scard and you're under arrest. And also this is a holdup. Like he has no idea what he's doing. He's just got the gun in the scene because the gun raises the energy. Why am I talking about this? I believe it's Anton Chekhov. In writing and critiquing the works of his peers, and I think even some students, I don't really know a whole lot about Chekhov, but some of you are familiar with the phrase Chekhov's gun. Essentially, Chekhov's gun is the idea in literature, particularly literature written for the stage, that you should not, you shouldn't have extraneous shit in a scene. Basically, everything in your scene should mean something. Everything in your story should have some meaning. Now, poets are very familiar with this because there is a certain economy of words in poetry, and brevity is the soul of wit. And often in comedy, you want to limit what you have in your scene to the things that mean something, because everything else that shows up is kind of extraneous props. Drama has a tendency to fail at that. And some writers, Ernest Hemingway is one, there are a lot of writers who deal in emotional, dramatic, particularly very self-reflective type of stories, have a lot of extraneous details. Now, Hemingway was not a fan of the idea of Chekhov's gun. Now, let me break down what Chekhov's gun means specifically. So Chekhov says, you should not, if you put a rifle over the mantle in the first scene, then it should goes off by the second scene. If that shit does not go off by the second scene, why is it there? And how many of times have you been watching a movie or television and you saw something and you were like, oh, that's going to come back. And that shit didn't come back. And it just kind of left you like, well, what the fuck? What, huh? Like, okay, here's the scene. Imagine there's two guys sitting in a car, black and white suits, Pulp Fiction gangsters. One of them, let's go ahead and use Vince and Jules. And Vince turns to Jules and says, I don't know. What do you think we got to do? Do we need to call Tony and Terry? Tony and Terry? Hell no. You know what happens every time we call Tony and Terry? True. Somebody ends up dead. What do you expect to happen in the next scene? Tony and Terry got to show up. They got to. Why invoke their name? Why say Beetlejuice 3 times if you're not trying to get the black and white suit walking through? Incidentally, if any of you all are fans of the show Community, one of my favorite gags that they did, I think it's season 3, might be season 6. No, it's season 3, where it's a Halloween episode and somebody says Beetlejuice and Beetlejuice walks through the frame. And you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. What makes it really dope is that in the 2 seasons prior, someone had also said that name. So when they say it in that 3rd season and he walks through the frame, it's the 3rd time saying the name. So they kept with the tradition. I always thought that was such a dope little catch. Anyway, Chekhov's gun, if you bring the gun into the scene, it needs to go off by the next scene. Otherwise, what the fuck is you doing? And that's a pretty reasonable point, right? It makes a lot of sense. Why am I talking about this? And why did I call this particular pre-read Chekhov's Bop Gun? 1993, Much More by Ounce. Y'all remember that? That was the opening to Bop Gun by Ice Cube. Ready or not, here we come, getting down for the one which we believe. That's what he sampled for the hook. It was One Nation Under a Groove, but he's gonna have some fun with the Bop Gun. It was a dope song. It was a bop. It was indeed a bop. Today, Ice Cube laid out something, and it was a really big deal. Like Ice Cube over the last 24 hours hung a gun over the mantle in the scene. And that gun over the mantle in the scene is essentially the contract with Black America. And what I'm wondering is that shit ever gonna go off? Or, like most of the Chekhov's guns in literature, is it also a red herring? Is it also a thing that diverts your attention, changes the narrative of the story? Because like Michael Gary Scott taught us, a gun is the most exciting thing you can bring into a scene. If you bring a gun into a scene, it changes everything, right? Michael Gary Scott taught us that. And I just related to you just moments ago. So now we've got a gun hanging over the mantle. It's got to do something. Or is it there to change the way we look at the story? Change the entire way we look at the story, because now a gun's in the scene, so the scene is different. It's fundamentally different, but it never actually goes off. Because come 2021, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, 2021 will indeed come. And Lord, I just pray that's not the year that the velociraptors crawl out of the soil and say, surprise, we was never gone. Like giant carnivorous cicadas, but that's neither here nor there. Come 2021, one way or another, we should expect to see some sort of movement, some sort of change. Like if Cube's candidate is reelected, and this is all something we should believe in, if we are indeed getting down for the one which we believe in, and that's where Cube stands, then we ought to expect to see something, right? Right? But if not, and Joe Biden wins, then we should expect to see Cube really doubling down on those efforts to get something going, because the mission doesn't stop just because your first channel, your first avenue didn't work. Like we should expect to see an increase in the political spokesmanship of O'Shea Jackson. And that's not to, put anything down about the things that he's done before. I know in a comment on someone else's thread, I referred to Trump as a lying liar who told an aging rapper, yada, yada, yada. And that's not to say that Cube hasn't done things in the activism space. He has. There's record of that. But I don't think that O'Shea Jackson, the activist, is who Trump thought he was talking to. I think Trump thought he was talking to an aging rapper and actor. Because Trump is a star fucker. And he likes to be in the presence of and have the approval of and the attention of celebrities. Not community organizers, not activists, not policymakers. He likes the attention of celebrities. And Ice Cube is one that even he can recognize. I feel like what we were served up was a bop gun. It was Chekhov's bop gun. It was a thing that came in to change the nature of the scene, to change the nature of the narrative, but doesn't actually impact the story. I don't think it's ever going to go off at all. I think it was hung over the mantle because somebody thought it would look like good set dressing. Somebody thought that it would write really well, that it would make the scene sound richer and more robust, but not that it would actually change the story. I don't see it. So when this program, the pre-read, is at its best, it's a quasi podcast on writing while Black. And so one of the things that I often think about, James Baldwin has a quote, or is it a quote is attributed to James Baldwin, I should say. write a sentence as clean as a bone. And so often when I am editing my own work and editing others, I look for the superfluous and extraneous words, like superfluous and extraneous, that look pretty and sound pretty, but don't necessarily do anything for the sentence that drives the story. Now, it's difficult to do that without impacting style, and style is very, very important to creative fiction. Otherwise, we're all just sort of writing the same thing. Style is part of what hooks us. It's part of what makes us fall in love. It's how you can tell the difference between a Terry Meredith story and a Julian Long story and a Langston Hughes story and a Zora Neale Hurston story and a Nana Kwame Adjei story and a so on and so forth and whomever and an Iowan Stone Tribal Flower story. It's like all of those things have certain styles to them. But when it comes down to it, sometimes there are things that we include that look pretty, feel pretty, but are too heavy to be there if they're not going to do more to advance the story. There are things that are too big, too exciting, too much of a gun to be there if we're not going to do something with it, if it's not going to drive the story in an important way. I tell all of y'all all the time, we're all storytellers. All of you are living your stories right now. And at some point, you're going to take what you're living and you're going to morph it and adjust it and adapt it and possibly decide to put it into the print world. And so I ask of you, what are the guns in your life that are never going to go off? And do they still need to be in your scene? Do they still need to be in your story? That's it. That's the closing thought. It's 9:54. This has been the pre-read. I'm going to kick it back over so that we can all get ready for the actual show, which will start directly. Talk to y'all soon. Peace. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and thank you so much for coming back. Welcome to Story Time with Julian. It is 10 p.m.-ish, and that makes it story time, and I'm the cat that's reading to you, so that makes me Julian. What's happening? It's so good to see you. Tonight, we are concluding this little portion of a journey that we took into the work of Tananarive Due in this wonderful book, My Soul to Keep. Now, I've got the Chiron up there so you know you can see it, but I like to show you the cover in the event that you decide you want to take a trip to your local bookstore, mask on, of course, and pick up a copy for yourself. Sometime throughout this program, you will also see links posted to some locally owned, Black-owned bookstores where you'll also be able to find the book. I had some issues with the lighting today, so the light behind me is off. It might look a little bit darker, but I think the color is a little bit more of the pink purple that we're used to, so I'm kind of cool with it. It means that I had to turn up the light that's in front of me so that I can see the book well, because my book lamp is a little dim. It's because that one's battery powered, and that's what happens as we are adapting and adjusting all of the wonderful little things that make this come together as we find we got to make some changes with stuff. Anyway, My Soul to Keep is a novel by Tananarive Due. It is a part of a trilogy of works. This particular piece that we started comes from the third section within this book. So it's from part 3 of this book. And for those of you all who were here on Tuesday, just kind of a refresher for you and to bring up to speed anybody who decides, F it, I like to hear the end of a story without hearing the beginning. That's fine too. For those of you all who were here Tuesday, you will recall that we were following the story of a man named Dawit, who was also called David. And Dawit/David is a husband and father. He is the husband to Jessica, the father to Kira, and the pet parent to a little cat named Tea Cake. And at the beginning of what we read on Tuesday, we find Dawit looking for Tea Cake and bringing Tea Cake into a makeshift laboratory that he fashioned in sort of the garage/woodshed. And there were a number of lizard corpses, and Tea Cake, being a cat, was intrigued by them, and Dawit shunned them away. And what we come to learn is that Dawit had been conducting some experiments, and that's why these lizards were dead, but there was one that had survived. And the nature of the experiments was simply he was killing them with the intent of bringing them back to life, and he was bringing them back to life with his own blood. Now, that's about as much as we know about that. We also know that Dawit/David had something of great importance to tell his wife, and that he was going to take his wife away on a weekend trip to the Everglades, a swampy, marshy area, to a secluded cabin out in the woods. You have to take an airboat to get there. All of this is the kind of stuff that if this were on the big screen, as Latricia Ransom suggests that it might have been had Blair Underwood gotten his way. All of these are things that suggest that if it had been on the big screen, you would have been saying, girl, no, run, girl, don't get in that car with him. Because a man who was just trying to, and who actually successfully killed the cat, and had been killing a number of lizards with this sort of grotesque experiment in mind, wanting to take his wife away, secluded weekend, out where nobody can hear them or get to them, doesn't sound like a good idea. But he does it. She goes along. Very romantic, hot, steamy sex scene. Lots of good stuff. If you missed it, go back and listen to it. But then he decides that it's time to prove to her this thing about himself, this thing that he can't tell her because the rites and the rituals that he is a part of says, no, you can't tell anybody about it. And we know, we have reason to believe that if anyone finds out, he would be in some danger, and so would she. So since he can't tell her, he is bound to show her. And what he chooses to do is take a large hunting knife that had never been used before, draw himself a nice bath, and gut himself, as is the nature of his order, because others in his order often amputate their limbs, decapitate themselves in some extreme instances, disembowel themselves, all as a part of sort of proving their earnestness and their loyalty and their connection to their order. He has every reason to believe that he will survive this. His wife has no idea what's going on. And so in the last scene that we read, Jessica, having just made love to her husband, feeling all dewy and warm and sexy and wondering where he is, goes into the bathroom, and she sees him there with the water rising up, thinking he's fallen asleep. The water is turned pink, and she wonders how he got the water to turn pink. And as she looks at him, she realizes the water hasn't turned pink. It's red around his middle. And she turns him over and his head snaps. The last lines are, "The water wasn't pink, she could see now. Near David, it swirled deep red. The closer she moved, the more red and murky the water. The red was coming from him." "I'm sorry, Jessica," David gasped. She stared back down at the knife, and she knew. Jessica couldn't stop screaming. That's where it left us. So we're picking up from right there. This is an excerpt from My Soul to Keep by Tananarive Due. Jessica was startled by the sound of a fanatical woman's wounded wailing echoing against the trees behind her until she realized the sound was coming from her. She sloshed through the sawgrass, nearly losing her footing in the knee-high water when she stumbled across something hard beneath the muddy surface. The beam from her flashlight skipped wildly from lily pads to grass stalks to isolated tree trunks, all looking large and forbidding. Another wrenching sob made her shoulders heave, and she had to wipe her eyes with her forearm because she couldn't see for her tears. The flashlight pointed uselessly into the dense, dark sky. "Help me," she said hoarsely. "Oh, Jesus, somebody please come help me. David is..." Her mind wouldn't finish the thought. Instead, another sob rose from her chest and nearly doubled her over. She didn't know what she'd expect to find out at the water's edge. It was as though she thought this was a movie where she would run to the beach and see an ocean liner floating in the distance, and all she would have to do is build a bonfire and wave her flashlight, and paratroopers would come floating down. Or she could peer out and spot a nearby island with a fireplace flickering through someone's window, and she could yell out. Water carried voices farther, didn't it? And someone would peek out and say, "Joe Bob, I think I hear something." Something unseen splashed in the water 5 feet in front of Jessica, and the sound made her scream and leap back. No, she wasn't in one of those movies. She was in a fucking swamp surrounded by snakes and alligators and God knows what else. It seemed unbelievable that an airboat from the mainland had dropped them off here just a few hours before. A few hours. And now everything was all wrong. And no airboat would come to her no matter how long she screamed into the night. Her feet were being sucked into the soft mud, and each time she took a step, the gunk nearly pulled off her untied shoes. Mosquitoes were biting her all over, and viciously. Her face, her arms, her legs, her bare buttocks. Mosquitoes were raining on her, sucking her blood. She thought about the blood everywhere. On the bathroom linoleum, in the tub, on the bed sheets. She tied around his middle to hold his insides in because, yes, his insides were falling out through that mess he'd made in his belly. And when she finished vomiting in the sink, she tied the sheet into a tight, tight knot around David's middle like they would have done on Emergency when she watched it as a kid. And the white sheet soaked through, and just like that, into crimson, the quicker picker-upper. She could smell it even here. The blood. It was on her hands, on her shirt. The blood smell blended with the smell of wet rot all around her, and she imagined her feet were drowned in blood. She shined the flashlight at the water to be sure, and all she could see was a pool of black filled with white specks. The mosquitoes pulled her from her trance, eating her alive, her mother always said. Yes, they were. With another scream, she ran out of the sawgrass bed until she reached the beach. Her feet kicked up sand, which clung to her damp legs and pelted her face. Then somehow she was on her knees. She'd fallen. She collapsed onto her palms and wept. She remembered to pray again. She had been praying so loud. Excuse me. Then somehow she was on her knees. She'd fallen. She collapsed onto her palms and wept. She remembered to pray again. She had been praying so long and so hard. Help me, Jesus. Please don't let him be dead. Please, oh please let him make it through the night. At that moment, Jessica had forgotten that David would have to make it through the night and all of the next day, and through an airboat ride, and through a journey to some hospital bound to be far, far away. She kept thinking he needed to make it through the night until morning, that was all, and then he'd be all right. Hadn't he said something like that? If he just made it to morning, everything would be fine. She needed to check on him. She needed to go back. Jessica was gasping to breathe when she made it up to the cabin and kneeled on the blood-splattered floor beside the bathtub. She hadn't realized she'd been thinking, please, 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 over and over again, until David's eyes opened and the thought turned into, thank you, thank you, thank you. David didn't say anything, but he looked like he was trying to smile. His head was still resting on the pillow she'd propped up on the rim because she couldn't think of how else to make him comfortable after she drained out the tub. She would have liked to carry him out of the tub herself, but she didn't think she would be strong enough, even if she acquired that superhuman strength people get in a crisis that she'd read about in Reader's Digest. And besides, what if she was carrying him across the room and his intestines spilled out? She'd seen something, she didn't know what, some soft, bloody organ poking through a hole in his belly. David hadn't said anything in a long time since he'd told her that he was sorry, right in the beginning when she first found him. He'd been crying before with her, the two of them crying hysterically. But he looked too weak to cry now. It wasn't all the blood or even her shock that made Jessica cry. It was David, looking so scared, writhing when she touched him, screaming for the pain to go away. Jessica squeezed his hand and felt him move his fingers inside of hers. I'm here now. I won't leave you, she said. You just hold on, okay? Just hold on. David was fighting to swallow. Then, when he did, he opened his mouth to try and speak. No sound came out. I waited, his silent lips said. His head sank back into the damp pillow, and his mouth closed again. Jessica didn't know what else to do, so she began to sing the most cheerful church song she could think of. Jesus loves me, this I know. She swallowed back a sob. 'Cause the Bible tells me so. A very rational voice in Jessica's mind spoke to her in such a calm tone that it transfixed her. Your husband is about to die, the voice said, and there's nothing you can do about it except sit here and hold his hand. So that is what you must do. Jessica squeezed David's fingers, but he didn't squeeze back. Pursing her lips, she gazed at his eyes. They had fallen shut. His eyes had been closed when she came back. She remembered. His eyes had never been closed before she went outside. I waited, he said. David? She whispered, "Honey, please." No. He would not open his eyes again. His chest had stopped moving, so his breathing was gone. Most of his blood was in the tub, dripping down the open drain. His heartbeat was gone. David was gone. Jessica cradled her husband's head against her breastbone. "You don't have to be scared anymore, baby," she said. See? See? The hurt's all gone. It's all gone now." That was all that mattered to her shut down mind. Then the rational voice inside whispered to her, nudging, "David is dead." The fanatical woman's strange wailing jarred her again. Dodd's first sight when he opened his eyes was Jessica. She was sitting half naked on the bathroom floor in a bloody t-shirt, her legs spread out straight in front of her, her head resting against the wall as she slept. Her face was not at rest. In fact, he barely knew that face. It was ashen and crusty. Her eyelids swollen, her mouth half open, as though she'd fallen asleep in the midst of a moan. Still, Dodd smiled. He could not move his head yet to do much more or reach out to touch her, but he smiled. It was a privilege to be so loved, an honor. His eyes overran with tears he didn't have the strength to wipe away. He felt as though he would need to sleep for days, but he knew he could not. It must be dawn, and there was so much to do, so much to say. "Jessica," he rasped. Her eyelids flinched, but she did not answer. A few minutes passed. Finally, Dodd strained to raise his hand to his tender stomach, where he felt so much pressure that it was a labor to breathe. She must have tied something around him. A tourniquet. Bless her, she had been so desperate to help him. His fingers found a knot in the sheet beneath his rib cage, and he fussed with it until it loosened slightly. There. The next time Dodd glanced back at Jessica, her eyes were open, regarding him. Her expression had not changed, as though she were dispassionately watching a hallucination. He smiled again. "I'm sorry I scared you," he whispered. Jessica sat bolt upright, her eyes darting frantically from her hands to the bloodied shirt to him again. All her confusion and gratitude and fear were written all in her face, in her trembling mouth. "I thought I'd lost you," she said with wonder, kneeling beside him, pressing a warm palm to his face. New tears streamed down her cheeks, clearing a path through the old ones. Dodd struggled with the knot to untie it, summoning all his strength to arch his back so he could pull the blood-soaked sheet away from his flesh. Alarmed, Jessica grabbed his hands. "No," she said, holding him with a firm grip. "Shh, don't do that. You're hurt, David. Don't. Baby, stop that." He stared into her eyes. "My wound's healed, Jessica. It's morning now. It's all right." She looked at him, frozen, her eyes squinting with bewilderment. She didn't move as he clawed at the sheet to expose his abdomen. "Look, I heal." Above his protruding navel, there was a jagged, closed scar. Fading signs of a wider lesion remained on one end where Dodd had first stabbed himself and twisted the blade while he struggled, through the pain, to carve across his abdomen. It had not been pretty work. He'd only progressed 7 or 8 inches, roughly halfway, before he began to feel faint from the agony of his task. The scars looked old, as if they were from many, many years before. The blood that remained on Dodd's skin, while it still appeared fresh, was not seeping from the closed wounds. He wiped his palm across his stomach, cleaning some of the blood away. Jessica was leaning over the tub, peering at his flesh closely. She touched him, gently at first, running her hand across the scar. Then she began to prod, Dodd felt a burning sensation and hissed. Cuidado! I'm still sore, Jess, he said. Jessica drew her hand away, staring wild-eyed at his face. Her mouth fell open and closed as she struggled for words. I don't... But I saw... Dodd took her hand and kissed it. Remember what I said? My blood isn't normal. My body isn't normal. My wounds heal. In an hour or so, even these scars will be gone. I'm all right, Jessica. Like I said, remember? I said that by morning, I'd be all right. I had to show you. Show me? She whimpered, still helplessly confused. He nodded. I'm sorry. It was the only way. Jessica blinked uncontrollably. Then a guttural sound rose in her throat, turning into a rage-filled scream, and she began to pound Dodd's chest with her fist. Her blows hurt, sapping away what little energy Dodd had gained. He cried out and fumbled to grab her fist to hold them tightly. No, baby, he said. Please, don't. That hurts. Jessica gasped as though he struck her. She stared at David with reddened eyes that were wide, frantic. Then her pupils drifted upward, gazing toward the ceiling, and she collapsed against the tub with heaving, wretched sobs. It's all right, Jess. It's all right. I'm here. I'm never going to leave you, Dodd said, reaching over to drape one arm across her shoulder. Jessica flung her arms around him, burying him and sobbing into his ear. Her grip around his neck was so tight that he felt she would choke, but he tolerated the discomfort. He stroked her matted, sandy hair. His own tears stung his eyes. It's okay, baby. I'm sorry. I'm here. I'm here forever. Though she would try many times, Jessica could never fully remember the details of her first day with David after she watched him die. Her first memory was sitting in the cabin's bed, somehow washed, wearing her own fresh-smelling nightshirt. A cool washcloth was draped across her forehead, and occasionally she felt David take it away and bring it back, damper and cooler than before. The blood smell was gone from her, but she could still smell it on him. You have a fever, she heard David say, and it reminded her of being a little girl in her bedroom, when she would stay home from school with the television playing Partridge Family reruns, and her mother would make her sit up to chew bittersweet, orange-flavored children's aspirin, and she'd dab cool water across her forehead, just like David was doing now. She slept a lot. That much she knew. She awakened when she heard a noise, the clatter of some pot from the kitchenette, the running water from the bathroom, the cabin door opening or closing, and she would open her eyes and stare up at the wooden planks across the ceiling. Once she smelled food and it nearly made her vomit. Are you hungry? She heard David's voice ask, floating somewhere above her. She shook her head without opening her eyes. It seemed to her that she must have been lying there for many days, an eternity, though the daylight was always there. At some point, David leaned across the bed to close the heavy curtains across the picture window, making the room darker, and she remembered being glad. And she was glad to smell his scent, his perspiration, the freshness of his shampoo, even the chemical pine scent from some disinfectant that had cleaved itself to him. She knew those smells. The blood smell, that was one she hadn't known. That was the smell that pitched her into semi-consciousness, the one her mind retreated from, lulling her to a calmer place. At last, David sat at the edge of the bed and kneaded her shoulder until she opened her eyes. He was wearing a t-shirt and cut-off shorts. He smelled like smoke. She could remember being confused about why he smelled like smoke. Much later, he would explain that he had burned the blanket and the bedsheet because of all the blood, and that he'd paid Mantooth extra to replace them. She never knew what explanation he'd given him. David was smiling at her. She was convinced by now that his image was part of some cruel, elaborate dream. So she did not smile back. Or had the blood and the moaning all been part of an equally elaborate nightmare? She didn't know which. Almost time to go, Jess. The boat will be here soon. We'll go pick up Kira, okay? Won't you be glad to see Kira? Kira. Oh, yes. Thinking of Kira, Jessica felt her mind emerging from its protective clouds. Kira was at her mother's. The weekend was over. It was time to go back home. Jessica reached over to David and lifted his t-shirt so she could see his stomach. She saw a crooked path of hairlessness under the cluster of wiry hairs growing around his navel. Nothing more. Nothing. She blinked, waiting to feel something. Whatever it was didn't come. You didn't have to do it this way, she said. David leaned closer. He hadn't heard her. She struggled to raise her voice slightly. I wish you hadn't done it this way, David. David gazed at her and nodded solemnly. Okay, he said. I'm sorry. He kissed her open palm. I'm really sorry. You said that there's more. Yes, he said. Later. We don't have time now. Wait until we get back to Ochapi. I'll talk to you in the car. David tried to stand up straight, but she held tight to his hand, pulling him back down toward her. Her words came without thought. You have to say thank you to God, David. You told me we'd both seen a miracle, and we did. You can't see a miracle without saying thank you. That's all he asks. That's all. David stared at her tenderly and touched her cheek with his index finger. She saw a struggle in his face, words wanting to come, but he didn't speak at all. Then he gently pulled his fingers from her grasp and stood up, walking away. Daddy, Mommy! Kira cried, flinging the front door open to run out to the van just as they drove into Bee's driveway. Jessica's heart surged to see her daughter dressed up in new matching purple shorts and a tank top, her hair parted into two puffballs secured with purple barrettes. Bee followed closely behind Kira, laughing. Bee was always overjoyed to see Jessica come home from vacation in one piece. And Alex would be next, Jessica knew. Her BMW was parked beneath the shade of the front yard ficus tree. Jessica was so glad to see them all, and yet it was a strain to pull the latch to try and open her door. Just stay in the car, David said, patting her knee, before opening his own door and climbing out. He called to Kira. Come here, Duchess. What did Grandma do to your hair? Kira giggled as David lifted her into the air, hoisted her over his shoulders, and began to spin her around. Her laugh sounded nearly hysterical, half joy, half fright. David, you gonna drop that child, Bee muttered, walking past him to lean into Jessica's window. Get your lazy behind out of this car. Dinner's waiting. How was the swamp? Before Jessica could open her mouth to answer, David walked behind Bee and knelt down, easing Kira to the ground. The swamp was great, but poor Jess came down with something. She's not feeling well. Mommy sick? Kira asked. Just a little cold or something. Bee reached over to touch Jessica's forehead. The gesture was so familiar, so warm, that Jessica longed to tell David she wanted to stay at her mother's house tonight. Just for one night. That was all. You've got a temperature. Snake didn't bite you, did it? Bee asked. You look worn out, Jessica. I don't know about this camping out in the swamplands. That's for white folks. Weakly, Jessica shook her head and smiled. No snake bite, she said. But worn out, yes, definitely. Alex appeared next in her window, wearing a smart mauve dress from church. Hey, girl, what's wrong? Jessica wanted to shrink from their stares. What would they see in her face? So much had happened. So much had changed. How could people go through changes and not show it on their faces? How could soldiers leave battlefields and simply go home to their families after all they'd seen? I'm just tired, Jessica said. Go get your bag, Kira, David said, playfully swatting her backside. We need to get Mommy home to bed. Lord, well, at least let me fix you some plates. Don't you leave me with all this food. Come help me, David, B said. Alex stayed by the van window, smelling of Giorgio, the scent she'd saved for Sundays. She looked worried, gazing into Jessica's eyes. Jessica glanced away from her sister. Everything okay? Alex asked. I don't think I'm cut out for camping, Jessica said. That bad, huh? Jessica nodded. When would her brain wake up? Well, I'm just glad you two are back. I couldn't believe it when Mom told me you were off to some island somewhere without a telephone. I just think of those slasher movies. I don't think I could go for that. Jessica couldn't think of a response. You sure you okay? Everything okay with David? Why would you ask that? Jessica asked, looking at her. Just asking, that's all. Seems like he's in a big hurry to get home, and he's smiling too much. He only smiles when something's wrong. There's nothing wrong, Jessica said, wondering how convincing she sounded to someone as insightful as Alex. She realized what a profound burden David's secret would be. She kept very few secrets from B, and none from her sister. Theirs was not a family of secrets. She'd even mentioned the incident with Mahmoud to Alex, and David's explanation. Now there would be a barrier between them. Call me later if you feel like it. I met somebody last night. No big deal yet, but he's an immigration lawyer. Well, I'll tell you later, Alex said, smiling. Ordinarily, a love interest would have been big news to Jessica. Now she had to force herself to feign a reaction. Nothing in her life, she began to realize, would ever be able to affect her the way it had before. Everything would seem trite and inconsequential compared to the past 24 hours. During the drive home, Jessica tried hard to listen to Kira's excited chatter about how she'd spent her weekend. How the little boy next door was a meanie, how he'd broken the toy she got in her McDonald's Happy Meal, how Grandma watched The Lion King on video with her for the 100th time. David filled up Jessica's silences, telling Kira about the woods and the cabin and the airboat. Jessica's thoughts could not drift far away from the extraordinary story David had told her during the 90-minute drive from Ochapi to her mother's house. He'd begun after taking a deep breath, and his tale had been barely punctuated by any pauses as he spoke. His eyes hidden behind his sunglasses, he stared straight ahead at the road. My name is Da Wheat. I was born in what is now called Ethiopia, nearly 500 years ago. I am an immortal. There are 58 others like me. Our blood lives forever, and our bodies heal. We do not age. We were not born this way, and our condition is not genetic. We underwent a ritual. We do not have extraordinary strength, and it is not our purpose to harm others. We are merely a race of scholars. Most of us choose not to mingle among mortals, but some of us do. We love and we have families. I have had wives and children before you. I have either outlived them or been forced to abandon them. We have a covenant that forbids us to reveal our truth. For what I am telling you, I expect someday to be punished. I take that risk because I love you. I've been told that it is time for me to leave you, and I cannot. I hope we can all leave together. David had said so much more frightening things while she sat and listened to his words. He told her that Mahmoud had been sent to spy on their family, that he'd been watching them, probably the house, David said, probably for many months. He might even have wiretaps or monitors in the house, David said. So they could not speak any further of this unless they were somewhere private, like the cave. Mahmoud may suspect what I have told you, so you must be very careful, Jessica. Our covenant dictates that no one can know. You are a reporter, and therefore he would consider you highly dangerous to the safety of our entire brotherhood. I'm afraid he might try to hurt you. This is why we must go very soon. And we must watch Kira at all times. Our lives will be different now. But until we go, we must behave as though nothing has changed. Jessica had asked questions. Where would they go? Could they ever come back? What was the ritual that they underwent? David said he was no longer sure about going to France, and he suggested Senegal, saying he considered the nation and its people among the most beautiful in Africa. There, Kira could refine her French and learn Wolof at the same time. About the ritual, he said nothing, but she sensed, in a way, she had learned from living with him so many years, that he had purposely chosen to keep silent on that point. So far, her questions far outnumbered David's answers. What was in their blood? If he had not been born immortal, did that mean that anyone could become immortal? Thinking of this as she rode with Kira and David in the van, Jessica felt her pulse quicken. She tried to let the thought go. She knew she would need time to absorb everything, so she couldn't dwell on too much on any one aspect. She couldn't allow herself to think too much at all, or her fear would drown her. She wondered how she hadn't lost her mind already. Are we almost home, Mommy? Kira's question drew Jessica out of her thoughts, but she felt dazed. Where were they? David had just coasted off the I-95 expressway ramp to Biscayne Boulevard, so they were 10 minutes from home. Jessica was comforted to see all of the signs of stable life she'd known. The Shell gas station, the convenience store, the empty glass office buildings glaring in the Sunday twilight. She was mesmerized by the normalcy passing her window. We're just about there, Duchess, David answered for her. Jessica was anxious to return home, to crawl into bed, but she wondered if it might overwhelm her to suddenly compare who she was now to the person she had been only 2 days before. Living in the same house. Would the idea of wiretaps in the bedroom make it impossible for her to sleep, to hold her husband? And who was her husband, really? Who was he? As usual, their secluded neighborhood calmed the fever in Jessica's mind. The shaded roadway was a sedative. She saw the Tinight's 10-year-old grandson riding his bicycle, and she could hear the jangling music of a nearby ice cream truck. Her life might spin out of control soon, but for today, at least, she was returning to the sanctuary of what she had known before. Yay! Look, Mommy, he's back! Jessica followed Kira's pointing finger as the van pulled into their driveway. She smiled gratefully. Tea Cake was posted on the front porch, his elegant tail curled around his front paws, waiting for them to come home. And thus endeth the story. That has been My Soul to Keep. Now, we're stopping there. I know it's only 10:40. We got a lot of time left. But the thing is, the way this story breaks out, the next excerpt doesn't really advance the story far enough. And if we go farther than that, we're going to have to read the whole book. And if we have to read the whole book, I'd have to go back and start from the beginning. So we're taking a pause there to talk about what we've read so far. I see Kitty Foxy is pleased to see that Tea Cake is back from the beyond. Yes, he did make it back. I'm going to go back and read through some of the comments, but tell me what you guys think of this story and the motivations of the characters. Dawit is an interesting character. I want to think of the great risk and sacrifice that he's making to take this on, but at the same time, I can't decide which is more selfish. On one hand, with his past families, he's left them. You know, he's completely abandoned them. On the other hand, asking somebody to choose forever with you. And make no mistake, that forever would be with him, because it's not like she can live eternally and run away elsewhere. She's not allowed. She's not one of the 58. She's not one of the brotherhood. So if she's going to live forever, it's a life with him. And I mean, there's some long lasting marriages out there, but like Prince said, forever is a mighty long time. I don't know. I'm kind of fascinated. Let's see what you all have to say. Let's run it back, run it back, run it back. First of all, for those of you all who enjoy this book and would like to pick up your own copy, you can purchase my Soul to Keep by Tananarive Due at Black Pearl Bookstore. And their website is www.blackpearlbookstore.com. Again, we don't get any kind of a kickback or anything from this. We just like to support local bookstores, Black-owned bookstores, small individual bookstores, because we like to keep the money in our communities. And so Black-owned bookstores have a tendency to be in Black communities. That's where we want to try and advance and try and grow things. But listen, worst come to worst and you can't find it elsewhere, but you want to continue to support that author, please do so. Please support Ms. Due, and you can buy My Soul to Keep wherever fine books are sold. All right. So let's see what we got here. So talking about the character motivations, Akanke says, I think I'm the only one not mad at him. I'm waiting to hear why on earth he had to roll out this gruesome plan. You know, real talk, having read through this full section, I too, and we've now seen it, there's got to be a better way. I'm like, did this brother just lack imagination? Like, was this word the onlyest way? Like, I get you couldn't tell her, but the onlyest way you could show her was like, here's my intestines. Have a serving a hot trauma, like some hot dick and some hot trauma. That'll make up that balances it out. Like, I don't understand why you would put somebody you love through that. I feel like that's a lot. Who on earth is waiting for more? And that comment I don't quite catch. So you're going to have to help me understand. Iowan, regarding Jessica not being cut out for the wood, says she is not. That's not all she's not cut out for. Listen, eternal life is, I mean, that's got to be the ultimate definition of the blessing and the curse, right? Like, I really don't think that everybody is meant for that. And that's why I think to ask her to be with him forever. I mean, I feel like there's a reason that the marriage vows say till death do us part, because you got to get a break at some point, you know? Yeah, there was some irony in her sister's thoughts. I thought that as well. Let's see, what else do we have? So we are going to look at that, man. This is why I love him. My folks is on it, y'all. Like, my admins and editorial board are like on point. So yeah. So Black Pearl Bookstore has a large back order of books. So if you can't get it there, check it out at Semicolon Bookstore's website. That's www.semicolonshy, because they're in Chicago.com. Yes, hot trauma. Wow. You know what? There's some people whose comments are not supposed to be put on the screen. I want to apologize to all the story time with Julian listeners. No, I was playing. He told her there was more he'd explain when they got home. That would have terrified me. You right. He did say there's more to explain. And while I'm curious in terms of the context of the story, how much more? What else? You have literally poured your guts out to me. You can't tell me more than that. Is all out in the open. Literally everything is on the table. You can't tell me shit else. I'm just glad he ain't sprinkling into it. You know what? So real talk, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the story, how many of you thought he was a vampire? Raise your hands. Well, I can't see your hands. How many of you all thought he was a vampire? Tell me in the comments, or you can indicate with your little like indicators at the top of the screen. because I was like, I knew because my editor was like, it's not a vampire story. It's not a vampire story. But it sounded real vampire-y. It's something in blood. I got magic blood and there's ritual and blood. I was like, this sounds mad vampirish to me. That when we get home is petrifying. Ain't nothing else I want to know, bruh. Yeah. That in general, I think, us being black folk of a certain tradition and of a certain age, wait till we get home is already terrifying. So the idea that something is going to happen when we get home, it's never good. It's never like, wait till we get home, we all have an ice cream. It's like, wait till we get home, something bad gonna happen to you. Either a ass whooping, or I'm gonna yell at you, or you're gonna get grounded, or something that you're not gonna like is gonna happen at home. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, that's why I don't really like being at home. It's gotta be, right? Okay, so we had a few folk that thought he was a vampire. I came to, you know what, Akanke, good day, madam. I say good day. That is it. So listen, like I said, I don't want to extend that story because we would end up getting caught up in, and I have not. No one has gone through to tell me where another good stopping place would be. So I just am not ready to make that commitment. But I love having y'all around, and I'm not ready to go yet. And we've got like another half hour of time. So I was wondering if I could read a simple story to you. I'm going to read one because I just want to read one because I like reading simple stories. But I would love it if you would indulge me and let me read it to you. Y'all can do what you want to do. I'm finna go ahead and read this. Let's see. And we'll pick up with more spooky stories next week on Tuesday. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, based on the calendar, we're going to be closing it out next week because I've got to get ready for some other stuff coming up real soon. Hold on. I'm trying to catch some of y'all's comments. I'm really furious at that comment too. You on punishment. We're not putting yours up. Latricia also thought vampire. All right, so there's a couple people that's interested in hearing simple. For those of you all, thank you so much, Terry. For those of you all who are, here we go. A toast to Harlem. Quiet can seem unduly loud at times. Since nobody at the bar was saying a word during the lull in the bright blues blare of the Wishing Wells' usually overworked jukebox, I addressed my friend Simple. Since you told me the other night that you're an Indian, explain to me how it is you find yourself living in a furnished room in Harlem, my brave buck, instead of on a reservation. I am a colored Indian, said Simple. In other words, a Negro. A Blackfoot Indian, Daddy-O, not a red one. Anyhow, Harlem is the place where I always did want to be. And if it wasn't for landladies, I would be happy. That's a fact. I love Harlem. What is it that you love about Harlem? It's so full of Negroes, said Simple. I feel like I got protection. From what? From white folk, said Simple. Furthermore, I like Harlem because it belongs to me. Harlem does not belong to you. You don't own the houses in Harlem. They belong to white folks. I might not own them, said Simple, but I live in them. It would take an atom bomb to get me out. Or a depression, I said. I would not move for no depression. No, I would not go back down south, not even to Baltimore. I am in Harlem to stay. You say the houses ain't mine? Well, the sidewalk is, and don't nobody push me off. The cops don't even say, move on, hardly no more. They learned something from them Harlem riots. They used to beat your head right in public, but now they only beat it after they got you down to the station house. And they don't beat it then if they think you know a good colored congressman. Harlem has a few Negro leaders, I said. Elected by my own vote, said Simple. Here, I ain't scared to vote. That's another thing I like about Harlem. I also like it because we got subways and it does not take all day to get downtown. Neither are you Jim Crowed on the way. Why Negroes is running some of these subway trains. This morning, I rode the A train down to 34th Street. They were a Negro driving it, making 90 miles an hour. That cat were really driving that train. Every time he flew by one of them local stations, looks like he was saying, "Look at me, this train is mine." That cat was gone, old man, which is another reason I like Harlem. Sometimes I run into Duke Ellington on 125th Street and I say, "What you know there, Duke?" And Duke say, "Solid, old man. He does not know me from Adam, but he speaks." One day I said, "Hubba hubba." One day I saw Lena Horne coming out of the Hotel Teresa and I said, "Hubba hubba." Lena smiled. Folks is friendly in Harlem. I feel like I got the world in a jug and the stopper in my hand. So drink a toast to Harlem. Simple lifted his glass of beer. Here's to Harlem. They say heaven is paradise. If Harlem ain't heaven, then a mouse ain't mice. Heaven is a state of mind, I commented. It sure is mine, said Simple, draining his glass. From Central Park to 179th, from river to river, Harlem is mine. Lots of white folks are scared to come up here too after dark. That is nothing to be proud of, I said. I am sorry white folks are scared to come to Harlem, but I am scared to go around some of them. Why, for instance, in my hometown, once before I came north to live, I was walking down the street when a white woman jumped out of her door and said, "Boy, get away from here because I am scared of you." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you are black." I said, "Lady, I am scared of you because you are white." I went on down the street, but I kept wishing I was blacker so I could scare that lady to death. So help me, I did. Imagine somebody talking about they scared of me because I am black. I got more reason to be scared of white folks than they have of me. Right, I said. The white race drugged me over here from Africa, slaved me, freed me, lynched me, starved me during the Depression, Jim Crowed me during the war. Then they come talking about they scared of me, which is why I am glad I have got one spot to call my own where I hold sway. Harlem. Harlem, where I can thumb my nose at the world. You talk just like a Negro nationalist, I said. What's that? Someone who wants Negroes to be on top. When everybody else keep me on the bottom, I don't see why I shouldn't want to be on the top. I will too someday. That's that spirit that causes wars, I said. I would not mind a war if I could win it. White folks fight, lynch, and enjoy themselves. There you go, I said. That old race against race jargon. There'll never be peace that way. The world tomorrow ought to be a world where everybody gets along together. The least we can do is extend a friendly hand. Every time I extend my hand, I get put back in my place. You know them poetries about the black cat that tried to be friendly with the white one? The black cat said to the white cat, "Let's sport around the town." The white cat said to the black cat, "You better set your black self down." Unfriendliness of that nature should not exist, I said. Folks ought to live like neighbors. You talking about what ought to be. But as long as what is, and Georgia is Georgia, I will take Harlem for mine. At least if trouble comes, I will have my own window to shoot from. I refuse to argue with you anymore, I said. What Harlem ought to hold out to the world from its windows is a friendly hand, not a belligerent attitude. It will not be my attitude that I will have out my window, said Simple. And thus endeth the story. Whew. Why does it feel like Langston Hughes wrote this shit this year? It's not me. It's not me. It can't be me. It cannot be me. Like, That part. I wished I was blacker so I could have scared that woman to death. Lord knows I did. Real talk. Yeah, that's a mood. I feel that a lot. Yeah. I remember when I was in middle school, I had started to come into my voice and come into my size. And it was around that age when I went from being a boy child to a man child. And they started to fear me. This was back when all cars didn't have the mechanical lock, so you could still see people doing that little clever elbow movement to lock their door. When I started to notice women clutching their purse closer to their sides, and I wanted to be blacker. I wrote a poem some years ago, and it had a line in it that said, I wanted to be bigger and blacker, become of a Langston hue. And I mean, I knew he was light-skinned, but I was making a point. So I sat in the sun and I begged eyes to see like a walker, sing like an angelou. And I buried myself death deep in African sands and beat my bones with ancient whips. Sought poetry in words like ebon mahogany, maple syrup, and brown sugar hips. It's something like that. I wrote that like a long time ago. That's when I was like a freshman in high school. We got about 15 more minutes. I'm going to read one more, and then we're going to call it a night, y'all. Thank you for sitting with me. For those of y'all who stayed, I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm going to go ahead and we saw that comment. I like that one. Valid and timely, right? I love it too, Kelly James. This is some of my favorite stuff. Truly, truly. God, I love simple and goodness. I'm sorry. Yeah, dude didn't come off too good in this story at all. At all. Not really feeling him. All right, let's go with another one. This one, I don't think we read this one before. This one's short, so y'all might get two. This one is called Simple and His Sins. You can go ahead and clear that. Just as the streetlights were coming on one warm Sunday evening in midsummer, I ran into my friend of the bar stools between Patty's and the wishing well. He was wiping his brow. Man, I came near getting my wires crossed this afternoon, he said, and all by accident. I told Joyce I would meet her in the park, so I was sitting out there on a bench with my portable radio, just bugging myself with Dizzy Gillespie, when who should come along, blasing along but Zarita. How does she look by daylight? I asked. She looked fine from the bottom up, but beat from the top down, said Simple. You kept your eyes down, I presume. No, I didn't neither, said Simple. I looked Zarita dead in the eye, and I said, Woman, what is you doing out here in the broad open daytime with your head looking like Zip? Zarita say, Don't look at my hair, Jess, please. I ain't been to the beauty shop this week. Then you ought to go, I said. Besides, how are you going to get your rest staying up all night? Last thing I saw last night was you, and now you out here in the park, and it ain't hardly noon. I could ask you the same thing, says Zarita, but I ain't that concerned about your business, and I don't have to answer your questions. You didn't mind answering them last night when I was buying you all them drinks, I said. To be a gentleman, says Zarita. You speak too often about the money you spend. I bet if your girlfriend ever saw you setting up in the bar, having a ball every AM, she would lay you low. Joyce know all about me, I said, and I would thank you to keep her name out of this. Joyce is a lady. What do you think I am? Yells Zarita. You ain't even an imitation, I said, coming out in the street with your head looking like a horror's nest. Why were you so hard on Zarita? I asked. I thought she was a friend of yours. She ain't nothing but a nighttime friend, said Simple, and I don't like to see her in the day. You would not like to see her neither if you had seen her this noon. I often wonders what makes some women look so bad early in the day after they have looked so sweet at night. Can you tell me? You can answer that yourself. Well, for one thing, a woman is half makeup, said Simple, and the other half is clothes. They got no business coming out in the morning before they fix themselves up. I said, Zarita, go home and put on some face. Also, oil your minery. I can see through you, she hollered. You just scared somebody will spy you talking to me out here in the broad daylight and go tell that female friend of yourn. Well, you ain't gonna drive me off with your insulting remarks. This is a public park. I aims to sit right here on this bench with you, just simple, and listen to that radio until the Dodgers come on. I follows Jackie. You will have to follow Jackie on somebody else's radio, I said. I will not be seen sitting in the park with no uncombed woman. Neither do I know you that well, Zarita, for you to sit down here with me. I sat on a bar stool with you, says Zarita. Not on the same stool, I says. Woman, unhand me and let me go. Don't you know I had trouble getting away from that girl? Zarita pinched a boogie right there in the park, and she has got a voice like a steam calliope. I cut out and went on up to Joyce's house. When I rung Joyce's bell, she come to the door in her wrapper and says, Baby, I thought you was going to sit in the park until I got dressed. I say, Joyce, you took too long. Let's go to a nice air-cooled movie instead of sitting in the park listening to the ball game today. I hear Jackie's twisted his ankle anyhow. And I put that radio down and took that woman the other way so she would not run into Zarita. Your sins will find you out, I said. I don't care nothing about my sins finding me out, said Simple. Just so Joyce don't find out about my sins, especially when their hair ain't combed. And thus endeth that particular trifling ass story. Oh my gosh. All right. My sins' hair ain't combed. Last story of the night we're going to read now is called Temptation. And then we're going to bring it to a close. April rightly points out the Simple stays with a woman. And how can you be that much trashination and stay laid up under a boo? I can't understood it. Oh wow, Iowan found some Langston Hughes works. That's dope. Yeah, I like that line too. Unhand me, woman. All right, we're gonna read Temptation and then we're gonna call it a night. Again, thanks everybody for sticking around. Let's go. We're gonna wrap up with this one last story. When the Lord said, "Let there be light," and there was light, what I want to know is, where was us colored people? What do you mean, where were colored people? I said. We must not have been there, said Simple, because we are still dark. Either he did not include me or else I were not there. The Lord was not referring to people when he said, let there be light. He was referring to the elements, the atmosphere, the air. He must have included some people, said Simple, because white people are light. In fact, white, whilst I am dark. How come? I say we were not there. Then where do you think we were? Late as usual, said Simple. Oh, CP time. We must have been down the road a piece and did not get back on time. There was no CP time in those days, I said. In fact, no people were created, so there couldn't be any colored people's time. The Lord God had not yet breathed the breath of life into anyone. No? Said Simple. No, said I. Because it wasn't until Genesis 2:7 that God formed man from the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. His name was Adam. Then he took one of Adam's ribs and he made a woman. Then trouble began, said Simple. Thank God they was both white. How do you know Adam and Eve were white? I asked. When I was a kid, I seen them on the Sunday school cards, said Simple. Ever since I've been seeing the Sunday school card, they was white. That's why I want to know where us Negroes was when the Lord said, let there be light. Oh man, you have a color complex so bad you want to trace it back to the Bible. No, I don't. I just want to know how come Adam and Eve was white. If they had started out black, this world might not be in the fix it is today. Eve might not have paid that serpent no attention. I never did know a Negro that liked a snake. The snake is a symbol, I said, a symbol of temptation and sin. And that symbol would be the same no matter what the race. I am not talking about no symbol, said Simple. I am talking about the day when Eve took that apple and Adam it. From then on, the human race has been in trouble. There ain't been a colored woman living that would take no apple from a snake. And she bet not give me no snake apples, give no snake apples to her husband. Adam and Eve are symbols too, I said. You are simple yourself, said Simple. But I just wish we colored folks had been somewhere around at the start. I do not know where we was when Eden was a garden, but we sure didn't get in on none of the crops. If we had, we would not be so poor today. White folks started out ahead, and they still ahead. Look at me. I'm looking. Made in the image of God, said Simple. But I never did see anybody like me on the Sunday school card. Probably nobody looked like you in biblical days, I said. The American Negro did not exist in BC. You're a product of Caucasia and Africa, Harlem and Dixie. You've been conditioned entirely by your environment, by our modern times. Times have been hard, said Simple. But still, I am a child of God. In the cosmic sense, we're all children of God. I have been baptized, said Simple, also anointed with oil. When I were a child, I come through at the mourner's bench. I was converted. I have listened to Daddy Grace and ate with Father Divine, moaned with Elder Lawson, and prayed with Adam Powell. And I have been to the Episcopalians with Joyce. But if a snake were to come up to me and offer me an apple, I would say, vomit, be on your way, no fruit today. Bud, you got the wrong stud now, so get along somehow. Be off down the road because you lower than a toad. Then that serpent would respect me as a wise man, and this world would not be where it is, all on account of an apple. That apple has turned into an Adam now. To hear you talk, if you'd been in the Garden of Eden, the world would still be a paradise. Man would not have fallen into sin. Not this man, said Simple. I would have stayed in that garden making grape wine, singing like Crosby, and feeling fine. I would not be scuffling out in this rough world neither, nor would I be in Harlem. If I was Adam, I would just stay in Eden in that garden with no rent to pay, no landladies to dodge, no time the clock to punch, and my picture on a Sunday school card. I'd be a real gone guy, even if I didn't have but one name, Adam, and no initials. You would be real gone, all right, but you were not there. So, my dear fellow, I trust you will not let your rather late arrival to our contemporary stage distort your perspective. No, said Simple. And thus endeth the story. All right, y'all. I had a good time. I had a really good time with y'all tonight. Thank you so much for coming through for story time with Julian. It is 11:09. We're going to go ahead and call it a night. But I really do appreciate you. How is Simple going to avoid original sin when he stays sinning now? True that. Simple is he ain't made it. He ain't made for it. Because we are still dark. Yeah, he got an answer for everything. Thank you so much, Kamisha. It is a pleasure to read to all of you. This has been Storytime with Julian. I am Julian. I can't wait to see you again on Tuesday for another episode. And please stay tuned. We're trying to make some other little additions. I know for a while I had the recaps going. We kind of pulled back on that, but there will be other little bits of programming for you to enjoy. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube. You can always watch the show there. Share the links. Subscribe to all of our social media channels. And just please continue to share when we post so that we can spread the word. The more of y'all that are here to kind of chat back and forth, the more fun this is for everybody. This is a group thing. It's not just me reading to you, but it's the feedback that matters. I love you. I appreciate you. It has been a real pleasure this evening, and I'll see you next week. All right. Peace.